I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. Gordon Czamanski is firmly producing music from the, I'm going to say, left field of electronica. Part jazz, part acid, part ambient, part psychedelic, part intergalactic, part deep house, wholly experimental and wholly avant-garde, which all goes to show really that I've no idea how to describe his music. And this, my dear listeners, is a good thing, I tell you, because it really sort of makes us think for ourselves about what it means to us. And with his first solo album just come out in the last month or so, I'm really excited to find out more about Jordan, his music, his life, and also his mindset as well. So, Jordan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So the first album, your first solo album, sort of came out last month, I believe. Which for me, from listening to it, is kind of like it's really this sort of musical journey. It's kind of like a body of work, which I really like the sort of the feeling of that.
Happy to hear that. Just one moment, please. I'm just going to close the door here.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I just I wanted the album to be kind of different than a 12-inch. And kind of take advantage of the medium and the label that wanted me to just explore all my different influences and styles that I enjoy recording.
And this is on Minimal Detroit as well, isn't it? Yeah,
which is a new label from Terrence Dixon, who is known as an amazing techno producer and performer.
Yeah,
but he's extremely open-minded musically, and definitely wasn't interested in me just giving him a techno album.
Yeah, but it kind of so it sort of shows like a lot of different sort of influences, in there. And I guess did you feel that this was sort of, when you were recording it, this is how you were at this sort of particular time? This is sort of what you're feeling kind of right now?
Yeah. The album includes music from probably the past couple years. Definitely 90% of it, and I guess it just reflects where I am, where my mind's at, and slightly less club oriented because I simply wasn't in clubs for the last 2 years. So I guess it's natural that it's less club oriented than some of my music.
I guess that a lot of musicians, bands, or sort of solo artists are the music that they're putting out now is as a result of either stuff that they've had on hold for a couple of years, decided to sort of hold it back, or probably sort of directly affected or kind of driven by their experiences over the past couple of years. As we were saying just before we started, has been quite turbulent for everybody.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? I think when we sort of look back at at how impactful this sort of couple of years has been on us, and how it's totally changed.
We're far from understanding it even, I think.
Yeah.
Years to come, it's going to affect everything.
I know. I had avoided it for a couple of years, and then just, when was it, in February I succumbed to it. I've been so careful as well. I was totally fine with it. It just felt like a light cold. But what I've been worried about, is the sort of the long COVID, the sort of the
I'm obsessed about that.
I know. You just don't know what it's gonna bring.
But if you're feeling okay now, I think it's a great sign.
Yeah. I felt just like a light, very light cold, and the slight cough, and
I think if you don't
just about
feel like long term now, you won't feel it in the future.
Yeah.
So you're safe, probably.
So going back to kind of like your childhood when you were sort of growing up. I mean, what were the kind of formative influences on I mean, both your music and also your life as well? What are the kind of big things that that you remember from your early days?
Yeah, well, I was born in the United States in Columbus, Ohio,
Mm.
and kind of suburban, late 70s classic lifestyle. Then age 7, my parents moved to Israel, Haifa, Israel, which was an extremely different place in 1982, 83.
Yeah.
So I guess the culture shock and not knowing the language, not knowing anything. Yeah, that was, I guess, the most formative experience of my early life, and I guess that's kind of shaped my my whole the way I interact with the world and the way I see things.
How long were you? Did you stay in Haifa or in Israel for?
Till I was 29.
Okay.
And then I moved to Amsterdam, and I've been there for 19 years. And right now I'm in Toronto, Canada. And haven't decided yet what the future holds. But I grew up, I was born in the States and early childhood there, and then grew up in Israel and Haifa, and then later Tel Aviv in the 90s.
I remember I used to go to, I've been once to Haifa, but I used to go to Israel quite a lot, probably in the, let's say, mid to late 90s.
Oh, good. That's the best time.
It was a lot of fun,
there
actually.
Was hope. I mean, there was, actually mid 90s until 90, early 90s was good. Yeah, late 90s already was kind of dark. Things were grim, but I mean, it's different than Israel was in the 80s, though.
Yeah, I remember I saw Garbage play there in, it was in Tel Aviv, probably maybe 97, I think, when they brought out their sort of version 2 album. And I think they played in a venue called, I think it was Hangar. Is it Hangar 19? Yeah.
I saw Lee Perry there.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I bet that was amazing.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, the sound sucked, but it was great.
But it was still great to see him anyway.
Yeah, no, we had a great time. Yeah.
So what was the, how did you sort of get into, sort of music? What were your kind of early musical influences?
Yeah, I was like one of those kids in the 80s. I was obsessed with the charts, and I was just one of those Walkman kids, and really was following the British charts religiously. I wasn't, and trying to get albums. Anybody that went out of the country, I would ask them to bring me a magazine, or cassettes, a lot of cassettes, and radio. Recording songs from the radio and compiling cassettes. God, so I was really obsessed with pop music, mainly British stuff. A lot of electro, Pet Shop Boys, later New Order, and I was just, I guess, since I really didn't speak the language much in Israel at the time, and I didn't have many friends, I kind of kept to the English-speaking music. I really resented Israeli culture, and I just stuck to anything, in English. And
right.
So I guess the gateway was like, just pop, electro pop, mid 80s or early 80s pop.
How did that? How did you? That kind of growing up there was spending parts of your long parts of your childhood there. How did you find that from your kind of mindset point of view, and also sort of finding your, I guess, sort of finding your people that if you didn't sort of make, if it was a bit trickier to make friends at the, certainly in the early stages, how did you kind of get around that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, in the beginning, yeah, I would say most, if not all, my friends knew how to speak English. I mean, that was an important part because I just wasn't fluent yet in Hebrew, and I had
a
horrible accent for a while, which was annoying. And I resented the place, really. So I seeked, first, when I was young, it was like English speaking kids. Later, any outsider, so I just found outsiders. I was just an outsider.
Right.
And then, of course, the music played a big deal in that, when I was a teenager, of course, and, bands and all that. So, yeah, I found my friends, later on through music, definitely. And just transgressive behavior in general.
It's interesting that sort of feeling of of being an outsider and sort of who you look to. Actually, with a lot of the quite a lot of other artists that I've spoken to, that they've had sort of similar kind of feelings of being somehow on the outside, and you almost like have an instinctive way of finding people. It's almost like you kind of like sort of recognize sort of people that perhaps in a sort of similar position to you, or that you can relate to in some way.
It's also cultural signifiers, if there's somebody that's wearing has a nose ring, then it's like, okay,
true,
it's my people, we'll probably get along, or if somebody's smoking in the woods behind the school, they're probably cooler than the kids that are like, inside playing football. So
and threatening to sort of beat people up and stuff like that,
So it's like, it's just, I think a lot of it is these cultural signifiers, and you just follow your intuition. Sometimes you're wrong, but usually when you're a teenager, those things are meaningful, I think.
Yeah. It's also as well, I think those sort of things eventually, you get on with your life over the years, and you maybe forget them. They're not in the forefront of your mind, but they're always there, aren't they? They never really go away. You can easily,
not yet.
It's funny how, like, even many years later, I have it as well, and I kind of like have these. They're not even flashbacks. They're actually sort of quite vivid memories of things that happened that sound small on their own, but you think that you start to put things together and you think, oh yeah, that's why I've got this, kind of personality trait, or this is why I've got an issue with trusting people or whatever. It's funny how it stays with you.
Yeah, I mean, I just stopped, but I've done psychoanalysis for a decade.
Right.
Amsterdam. Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
I mean, I'm all about.
You're all on that.
Not anymore. I just stopped that. Actually, yesterday was the last ever session. We did it on the phone since I came to Toronto. Well, since before that, I mean, during the pandemic, we did it on the phone. But yeah, it was a decade of psychoanalysis. So yeah, wow. I'm all about that.
What I mean, without going into anything sort of too personal, but I mean, what was the reason for you starting that? Sort of
panic attacks.
Oh, right, okay.
And I wanted to, I had problems getting on planes for gigs, and I had to.
Right. Okay. So they're very practical things that were.
No, that's what initially. I mean, I've always wanted to. Of course, I've always had like issues. I've never been a happy camper, And I always, in my 20s, well, and still, smoke way too much weed, and I'm self-medicating since my teenage years. So, I know something's wrong. And due to the wonderful Dutch health insurance, I was able to get a psychoanalyst for free.
Yeah.
So I took advantage of that, and it started out with me wanting to, solve my practical issues of getting on airplanes and flying the gigs. But it turned into, of course, something way more complicated.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I know somebody who started to see, go into a very sort of similar, I guess, not a similar situation, but the impact, or she started going to see a therapist for what she believed was a sort of certain issue that was happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the longer that it kind of went on, or actually, I think kind of quite a short period into it, kind of realize actually this is, the actual thing that we're going to get to is this.
It's always, something deeper,
Yeah, totally.
All those kind of things like panic attacks. I mean, that's just a symptom of something deeper that needs to be resolved or dealt with in chemical ways. Some people,
So moving to Amsterdam, and you've been there for what about sort of 19
years.
Yeah. I mean, as a city and a kind of like an environment, what did that place give you, do you feel?
Just total freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, I was total freedom and I guess a bit more sense of belonging, even though Tel Aviv was amazing, in the 90s. I mean, I had a great time living there. And there was, some kind of scene. I mean, nothing like in Europe, but there was something at least. I mean, but it was still in Israel, and I just needed out. And also career-wise, I mean, there's no way to. I mean, maybe now there is with cheap flights and stuff, but back then you couldn't live in Tel Aviv and make a living from music. It just it doesn't exist.
The finances just don't.
I knew nobody. I knew nobody that made a living from music.
Yeah.
Zero people. So so I felt like something needs to happen. So I just thought I would try Amsterdam because as a tourist, I always loved visiting Amsterdam. It's a sense of freedom, which now I see as like basic libertarianism, unfortunately, and not really freedom, with the pandemic and the way the Dutch dealt with it, are dealing with it, which is horrendous. But I loved, first of all, weed, was kind of legal. So I don't have to be afraid of the cops like I did in Israel.
Yeah.
There was a kind of way healthier music scene in my scene. This whole big love of like Detroit techno and Chicago house and Amsterdam, and a history of it, and record stores and labels, which didn't really exist in Tel Aviv. Yeah. So it was a really good place to land. And everybody speaks English, so that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And at the time, it wasn't yet expensive like it is now.
Yeah. I remember getting an earlier guest that I had. She lives in New York, and she moved there from, I forget where it was, obviously outside of New York, sort of smaller place. But she said, New York became the fifth member of my band. Such was the, kind of like the importance of that kind of, I guess, that sort of vibe of the city, of the environment that she was in. just kind of helped with the, kind of creativity. And also, I think from because she'd sort of moved from a sort of smaller town to just that sort of feeling of being free and almost you can disappear
for
into
me,
this,
yeah. I mean, I can't say that Amsterdam. I mean, I stopped drinking when I moved to Amsterdam, so I also didn't go out much. So actually, I was basically in the studio for the last 15 years. So I can't say that the city that I felt ever, and that's one of the reasons I may be leaving, because I don't really feel like I'm part of the city. You know, it was very comfortable for me, an escapist kind of thing for me to move there. I never feel like I really integrated into the city or the culture. And that's another thing I learned in the pandemic. I don't have much in common with the locals in Amsterdam, and that's painful realization. But it's just the way it is, and so I can't say that I feel like Amsterdam plays that kind of role in music. But yes, a sense of freedom, because I stopped reading Israeli news 5 times a day, so that was the freedom. Getting away from that kind of place.
I mean, maybe it's been kind of like 19 years escapism, and it's okay, well, that's over. We changed, don't we? I mean, actually, on that, how do you feel that with the the places that you lived and your sort of experiences that you've sort of changed as a person?
Well, I'm getting better slowly. That's, basically it. More present slowly. We'll see. We'll see. Not to give too much information, but the last, I quit taking Xanax a couple days ago. So these last 2 days are the first 2 days in the last decade, probably, that I. So things are happening. Positive things, and
things.
So hopefully, like you said, it's just I did my time there. It was useful. It was important, and now I need a little change.
I mean, it's interesting. Again, I think that this, sorry to labour, but I think the environments, and whether you kind of integrate the sort of like what we've had over the past couple of years, this sort of isolation as well, and and how that sort of impacts kind of creativity, where you get your strength and sort of influences from. It's an interesting. I think it must be as an artist incredibly difficult when you have that sort of isolation, to kind of keep that sort of creativity going. Do you think?
I think it's helpful also. Less distractions.
True. Yeah.
Because for me, traveling almost every weekend and performing in nightclubs definitely had an influence on the music I was making for the last 20 years. And it's kind of nice not to have that influence, not to have it while I was recording the album. So
true. Yeah.
I could kind of go back a little deeper without that every weekend, the boom, 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 and the crowd, and having to even subconsciously kind of feed into that. So I think without the isolation of the pandemic, I would have recorded probably a different album. So I'm kind of grateful for that, at least, out of this whole nightmare. I'm at least grateful for that.
And I guess you had the your studio as well, the kind of studio where you could kind of like retreat to. It wasn't like you had to go elsewhere for your studio. It was there for you, so you could get to it?
No, it was amazing. I mean, it's funny. 2 months before the pandemic started, I moved my studio, which was in a basement, like half an hour bike ride from where I live.
Yeah.
And I was there for almost a decade. I moved it to my house, to the attic. So it was very convenient, during the pandemic. I just spent every day in the studio all day.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to go anywhere to do that. So there was that. There was walking the dog, and that's it,
Yeah. So it's kind of like getting into like a simple life, so to speak, isn't it?
Very, but
away from the influences, the externals.
Yeah, totally.
Did what during those 2 years? Did you miss playing live? Not so much.
Yes, but like I definitely did, because playing live, is very like central to my existence in the last 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Especially since my live shows have always been improvised, so it's a big creative outlet.
Yeah.
For me, so yeah, I mean, so that was difficult. But then I started streaming live jams from my studio, so that kind of replaced that.
Yeah.
So I must have done 100 of them. So that kind of replaced the outlet of
that kind of live experience.
Shows. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's different and it sucks compared to playing in front of a real audience, but it was something at least. And then, of course, there's the ego thing. My ego got a lot from live shows over the years. And that suddenly stopped. I mean, it's not a huge deal. It wasn't a huge deal, but it still is something. Combined with lack of income, it's kind of a 1-2 punch to your ego.
True. That's very true. Yeah.
But I'm getting over that. I'm getting over it slowly.
With I'm glad you sort of touched on improvisation, which is absolutely right. That's something that I kind of take away from your music, and sort of watch some of your live shows. Is that improvisation? I guess that's kind of like in your mindset. That's who you are, isn't it? That's how you work. I mean, for a lot of people. I mean, if I thinking of just me myself, kind of like going on and sort of like improvising as you do. I'd be like before I'd be like, oh my God, can't do this. I don't feel prepared. It's like I guess it's a characteristic. It's sort of who you are.
No, but I felt that way too.
Did you?
I feel like that every time, but it's just I learned that the live shows are better when I improvise, even when I'm terrified. If I don't feel ready, I just maybe it's not always, it's not consistent, but it's boring to be consistent. And I mean, the advantages in my mind for me outweigh the disadvantages. Now I have friends that feel frozen if they have to improvise and are not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, but I think that once you do it a few times, and it gets easier. It doesn't it never gets like totally easy, but it gets easier, and then it reaches a point where you no longer freak out before the DJ, before you stops playing and you have to start.
I think that's fascinating. I really do think that's fascinating, because I sort of look at sort of music, and I did it's funny you say, actually, you've just made me remember. I did I spoke to Jennifer Finch, who's the bass player for L7, and she'd said that in the kind of like early 90s, when L7 were pretty much at the top of their game, she used to have incredible stage fright, like almost to the point of where she couldn't go on stage. And it's funny, isn't it? You sort of look at. I used to look at her and think she was like supremely kind of confident.
I saw them in Lollapalooza in '92.
That was their thing, wasn't it? Lollapalooza in '92. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And you know, so you know what you're saying. You know that you know you have these kind of fears and just like, oh my god, right. But you know, I sort of look at you and think, okay, well, wow, I was just doing this amazing stuff. And it's sometimes hard to sort of see that behind that, but you know yourself because you face it yourself.
Put on a good act. No, it's like it's. I mean, Jesus Christ. I would say 70%, 80% of all the gigs I did with either Juju and Jordash, the group duo I'm in, or Magic Mountain High, the trio I'm in. I end every show hiding under the table with the gear and smoking a joint and hating, like wanting to kill myself, thinking this was the worst live show I ever played. You can't talk to me after a live show. If you tell me that it was great, I'll want to punch you in the face because I think it's shit, and that's the last 15 years have been like that.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, but then wake up the next day and do it all over again.
And do it again. Yeah.
And if, and I used to get so upset with my music partner in Juju and Jordash if he wanted to pre-prepare anything. It was like a religion. If he wanted to if I saw him like just working on a beat in the hotel room on his drum machine, I would get so pissed off at him, that he's ruining, anything that is pre-prepared is like was a sin in my mind. Like I'm less religious about it now, but I still truly believe that every live show that's completely improvised, for me, I play better.
Okay, so this is like
I suffer, I hate it, but I still think I play better than if I would have pre-prepared anything.
Wow.
Because for me, the 5 minutes of amazing, 5 good minutes of improvised like purity is always better than even an hour of solid, like a solid live show. In any live situation, we never reached the, close to, like if we pre-prepared stuff, it would never touch the good parts of a live improvised show. There's always something there that I could have never prepared for in the improvised live show.
It's funny.
I'm a bit stammering. I'm not making.
I hear you. No, I totally hear you with that. I really do. It's almost like that.
So it's worth the price of having like 10 shit minutes in the middle as well, because there's always going to be 10 shit minutes or 5.
Yeah.
Every live show, there's going to be what we call the valley, where things that aren't going well, especially if you're playing with 2 or 3 people. There's going to be miscommunications. There's going to be misfires. So it's like there's going to be bad parts, but then there's going to be the 5 minutes which make it all worth it.
Yeah, the total exhilaration.
That it's just everything is working. We don't know why.
Yeah,
everything falls into place organically, and we couldn't have planned it in a million years.
Yeah. I guess I like that idea where it's so just sort of natural, spontaneous. It's coming from inside you.
The subconscious is a very strong tool.
Strong, yeah, absolutely. And almost, I think sometimes if you prepare things, you kind of setting yourself up for real disappointment when it doesn't. You know that you just haven't reached what you prepared for.
Yeah.
you know, the disappointment that you get, it's like, shit, you know, that's what I really wanted to do, and it just kind of didn't work. You improvise, and it's kind of like, yeah, it kind of gives you all this through it, but
you have the creative processes happening on stage, you know,
yeah,
and not back in the studio. So there's some freshness to that. And the crowd feels it, you know, that it's a tightrope walk, basically.
So how do you then sort of translate that sort of approach that you enjoy back into when you're recording material?
This is how I record, and like I basically multi-track record every single jam.
Yeah.
And when I say multi-track, I mean like, you know, 22 channels. So all the synthesizers, drum machines, separate outputs, effects, I print the effects. So all the outboard gear I'm recording. And so I record for half an hour. I jam for half an hour. I start with either a sound or an idea. And within that half an hour, I know there's going to be a track, like a cohesive kind of track, because I have half an hour of truly free jam that is multi-tracked, so I can do whatever I want with it, mix it perfectly later. So I usually work like during that half hour of jam that I'm recording. I usually, you know, work on one idea. That whole half hour, I'm playing that same idea, different ways, different, like, you know, I don't switch when I'm in album recording mode. I don't switch ideas every 5 minutes. I'm focusing on one idea, that the first idea I like, I just fuck around with it for half an hour.
Yeah.
And then I know that at the end of that half an hour, you know, there's a track in there for every time. So basically, you know, I had like, you know, 50 jams that I recorded that year that I recorded the album. And from them, you know, I chose and mixed these on the album. But basically, I translate the improvising to the studio and just shape it up later. Chop it up.
I remember there was a sort of great story, you know, it's a true story about Miles Davis and his band.
Theo Macaro.
Was that the film?
Bitches Brew.
It was I'm thinking of he did a soundtrack for a film. He did a soundtrack for a film.
Yeah.
And he saw the film. So the, you know, kind of director sort of played in the film. I wish I knew. I could remember. I'll remember the name of it.
I think Ascension. It's a French film.
Yes, it is. That's the one. Yeah. Yes, you're on the right one. Yeah, and so he saw that the director showed in the film. Said, okay, take that away, and he basically, you know, kind of remembered the film, went back to his band, described what the film was about, and they then improvised the soundtrack from that, which I thought was just incredible. Absolutely incredible to, you know, to be able to do that. I mean, that's just phenomenal.
Well, it's Miles.
It just is.
Yeah.
How do you feel about you know, kind of like when you're you know, you mentioned like in the live shows, you like after it you're thinking, that's Christ, that was shit, blah blah blah. So how do you feel about, you know, those, you know, either kind of live when you're improvising in the studio, about things that maybe go wrong or aren't sort of perfect? I mean, are you a perfectionist, or do you just kind of like embrace your imperfections?
I embrace the looseness. I like the looseness.
Yeah,
you know, especially since I operate within the like electronic music realm, dance music realm, generally speaking. You know, I feel like, you know, it needs a big injection of looseness into that scene. So no, I like the looseness, and I love it. I mean, I love awkward moments during live shows. Like, I really love throwing people off, you know, in the dance music scene specifically. I mean, there, you know, you go to a club night and all they're hearing all night is boom, boom, boom at like pretty stable BPM all night, quantized shit.
Yeah.
And I like disrupting that. That's the least I can do.
I mean, I guess you kind of when you're kind of working if you're working with Gal, for example, or any of the other sort of collaborators that you have, you're looking, you need to be on the same, in some respects, sort of on the same wavelength as that, so that your partner doesn't kind of get pissed off with you sort of fucking something up or whatever. And it's kind of important, isn't it?
Yeah, extremely important. I mean, Gal and I developed over the years and years of us jamming together and working together. And it's really, I guess it depends a lot on character, not has nothing to do with music even.
Yeah,
just being able to read the other person's energy at the moment.
Yeah, and
I mean, Gal really, he knows me, so and I learned to know what to expect from him. So playing live with him is very easy. He knows when to mute the kicks. He knows when I'm gonna do something, and that's like over the years and years of playing together. But even with new people, like I have an album coming out with Terrence Dixon, and we met for the first time a couple of years ago, or a few years ago already. And that week we recorded an album. So with some people it's just chemistry, basically, and it doesn't take any time at all. And it's really just a matter of human communication and chemistry.
And that was your
that's with Terrence, for example.
Yeah. It's I like that about where you get those sort of instant connections, and also it's interesting when you have to kind of build them and get to understand somebody and get to understand that sort of same get on a meeting in the middle somewhere, getting the same wavelength, and that's where you might not always agree on things, but if you're of the same kind of mindset, you can same philosophy almost, isn't it?
Yeah. So with Terrence, it's all about that. He believes in the power of we never even talked about it, but I know it, in the power of the subconscious and just improvising. And we didn't need to talk about it, so it just happened. Same with David Mufang. It's just works.
It's funny, isn't it? I just think this is really interesting how those almost going back to what you were saying when you were talking about you're kind of live and sort of improvising when it's just your gut, and it just sort of happens. I mean, I kind of think sometimes it's almost like when when you're watching a live show, and there are some parts of that show, whether it's if you're watching a band and it's a particular kind of chord, or just everything sort of coming together, and almost like causes your body to kind of go to the you make these sort of movements. It's just instinctive, isn't it? Whether it's you just want to punch the sky or just kind of do something, but it just sort of hits you from the inside. It's just that an instinctive kind of reaction to an external.
I mean, that's a true reaction.
Yeah.
No, I really try to stay away from like intellectualizing too much, and it doesn't work for me. Yeah, I just have to trust my subconscious,
Yeah. So when does just talking about Terrence, when does the release with Terrence come out? Is that,
I think in a couple months or something.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on Rush Hour.
Yeah. So any more sort of collaborations sort of coming along that you can sort of talk about?
I've been sitting on an album for a few years that I recorded with a sax player named Jeff Hawley in Amsterdam, and a double bass player, a good childhood friend of mine named Ilya Ziblaczai. And I used to play jazz with Ilya, and he's a composer now. He lives in the Netherlands, so
Yeah.
we get to see each other relatively often.
Mm.
So it's it's the three of us. We're like a band. We had big plans, we only played live together a couple times, and we recorded this album, and we were planning on doing more live shows before the pandemic, but then so we're sitting on that album, just waiting for the label to release it. I don't know when that will be.
Yeah.
And that's also all improvised, like 100%. Like that's also divorced from the dance music scene. So
yeah,
it's very free. Like I wouldn't be able to describe it.
Yeah.
Really.
What are your thoughts on kind of like new generation of DJs and producers coming through, and sort of how they can work with kind of like across sort of generations? Because I sort of have this sort of feeling that kind of we can learn so much from each other. Kind of like sort of 60-year-olds can learn so much from 20-year-olds and vice versa, but we don't do it. It goes to, kind of products that are created. They're created for specific kind of age groups, and it just sort of furthers this kind of like almost sort of segregation that, how do you see that?
I think I can't generalize. It's also the last 2 years I haven't been in nightclubs, so I haven't been really hearing young DJ, because when I used to play out, I used to get opportunities to hear DJs before and after us playing. So I kind of got more exposed to that. The kids are always all right, the kids are always gonna bring the next thing. I have no problem with the kids. I hate the dance music power structure and how the industry. I fucking hate it. It's the worst. But
it's kind of run by
but the kids are okay. The people with the money, they're the ones, like the structure sucks, but
the structure,
and but that's nothing new. But I really am not. I'm really not. The last couple of years, I'm kind of out of touch though, so I can't really comment. I don't know. There's nothing worse than the dance music scene. There really is. There's no scene dumber than the dance music scene. So if I judge from what I see on Instagram and social media, then it's a fucking trash, like fire, like a trash can on fire. But I know that there's kids making dope music. I'm just not exposed to it right now. So I'm not going to judge the kids by what I see on Instagram.
I think that's
I know it doesn't represent what's going on.
The reality.
Yeah, when I was 20, you would not find me on social media. It didn't exist. But if I was 20 today, I would not be on social media.
You would not be on it. No, it's
not cool.
It's a cool horrible part of our life, isn't it?
It's a nightmare. But especially in the dance music scene, that's like the lowest of the low. Like really the lowest common denominator. The shittiest music is successful. It's a dumb as shit scene. Like I'm sure every scene is stupid, but dance music scene is really special.
Sort of particularly. But you just everybody knows, you're at the mercy, of this kind of sort of big sort of faceless thing that decides what it's going to show other people.
Yeah, but also you have to play along if you want to make a living.
You do, totally.
You have to play nice. You have to suck up to a lot of assholes in the dance music scene if you want to have gigs. I'm sure it's similar in the rock scene. I just haven't been in a rock band since I was 17, so I have no idea.
I think it's probably the same. I think it's probably the same. The world. I mean, people are people, aren't they? And you know, like an arsehole in the dance music scene is going to be an arsehole in the rock music scene.
100%.
Sort of vice versa, you know, it's just never going to change. But you're right. I mean, it's you know,
the problem is
like,
that there's money in the dance music scene, you know, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And the good thing too, but it's also the problem because it also attracts a different type of, because, you know, in the early 90s when I was in a band, it's, you know, nobody thought they would make money. So there was less of those less yuppie assholes though. And there's all these wannabe DJs that, you know, they want to make money, they want to be famous, they want to be on Instagram. So it kind of attracts a bit of a different kind of crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of like where you, yes, that always that balance, that dilemma of, you know, kind of making a living from it versus, you know, kind of keeping your integrity, you know, as an artist. I mean, it's like the centuries old dilemma, isn't it? How you
guess.
So anyway, Jordan, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's been great talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Take care, my man.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.